Welcome to another Light for the Journey. Thanks for joining us. We're starting about 10 minutes late tonight. Normally at 7 o'clock. We had a dinner. Terry, it's good to have you with me as a co-host. Welcome back.
Thank
You were gone last week. Bruce filled in for you. He had big shoes to fill in, and he did a good job. We were glad to have him. Our apologies to those of you who may be getting on with us live. I'm looking. But we're sorry for starting 10 minutes late. At 7 o'clock, we were having to reboot the computer. For whatever reason, it just wasn't working properly. But here we are, and glad to be here. Today is, for our church special day. This evening, we just finished eating turkey. We'll have a turkey coma here in about 10 minutes, okay?
Yeah, it's coming. It's
but it was
building up.
good. Yeah.
It was a little too good.
Well, I had some comments about that French silk chocolate pie.
You should have announced that people should take those pies home. Anybody take them home.
I'll take them home.
Oh.
I didn't announce that on purpose.
There was like 10 pies. There's a lot of pies there.
I'm sure. Actually, if you hear noise in the background, it's because we have folks back in the fellowship hall, and they're cleaning up and gathering and changing things. But we're glad that you're here tonight. Today I was given history lessons for the most part, and the big challenge for me was, okay, God, where are you in all of this? And so I tried to tackle today's message. I preached a long time. Someone said to me today, said, Pastor, did somebody put an extra quarter or two into you? Did we get a little more today?
That was an awesome message. I really enjoyed that message.
You did.
Well, you know how I am about stuff like truth.
Yeah, well, tonight, folks, we want to talk about America and her beginnings. We want to talk about what we know as the Pilgrims. Actually, they were in their day really were called the Separatists, and the Puritans, or they were, we call them Pilgrims, but they called them Separatists for the most part. They were not liked by England. They were not liked in a lot of other areas of Europe. Spain had some issues and that kind of stuff. So we're going to talk a little bit about our beginnings, because what is happening, and what I shared this morning is happening is that our history is literally being rewritten. And what I want to talk to our audience about as well is that we need to tell God's story, the God story.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it amazing that when I look at Israel, Terry, that God was really, really concerned with them remembering and repeating the story. And we're living in a climate right now where they're destroying all of our monuments and all of our historical. There's history with this. It's kind of the reminders historically, and I don't care how we feel about it. Some of the reasons that they pulling down monuments is because it reminds us of how bad we can be.
That's what they're saying.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think that we need to be reminded of how ugly man can get. I think that's critically important. Yes. I think God wants us, to remind. In fact, I preached not too long ago, Terry, that very thing, that God wanted, some things that he did and wanted them to be reminded. With Moses, when they built the calf, remember, he wanted them to remember when they brought the censers. We're not gonna redo that. Mm-hmm. We've done that in previous. So let's talk about and then I'll get into but I mean, you listen to the message. It was a long one today. Someone, like I said, asked if I had some extra quarters put into me or something today. But I was deep all week in history. I had my nose in the books, reading up on the Puritans and reading up on the Pilgrims, the colonies, particularly the first two, Jamestown and then at Cape Cod and Plymouth. Um, what did you like about it? I mean, you already told us what you thought. Your kind of message. But what did you like about it? And would you have said something, added something? Did you think something maybe should have been highlighted in a different direction or whatever? I don't know.
I liked everything about it, simply because here you're preaching right to the choir when I'm hearing that message, because that's been something that's frustrated me for so long, is how one political side will take and continues to try to remove and make everybody forget this nation's origins. And we've discussed before, and you mentioned it in the message today, about how God warned the Israelites repeatedly, remember, remember, remember. Write them on your forehead, write it on your doorpost, talk to your children about it, because he knew how important it was that they remembered their past, their origins, where they came from. Just listening to Leviticus, my wife and I have been studying Leviticus, and how many times he reminded the Israelites how he had brought them out of Egypt. And my wife was making mention of that even, and I said, in a way it wasn't, coming out of Egypt. So many times God hardened Pharaoh's heart, because God wanted to do even more incredible miracles to show the Israelites and the world that, hey, I am God. I can do this stuff. Things beyond anything you can ever imagine. There is absolutely no doubt who I am. He was making that point, and then as we're going through Leviticus, I don't know how many times, and if you get into the Bible, he repeatedly says that. I am the God that brought you out of Egypt. And I thought, if I've heard that once, I've heard that at least a dozen times just through Leviticus. And I think the point was that he was saying, I brought you out. You were slaves in Egypt, and I brought you out, and in bringing you out, I performed miracles beyond anything the world could ever imagine to help you to remember that I'm God. So it was that important that they not forget. And now here we got the very thing going on
in our own nation.
In our own nation, they're doing everything in their power to make us forget. And, it's bad enough that they want to do that. But the other thing I found in Leviticus that blew me away, I didn't know it was there, but I know it's in Deuteronomy 28, is about blessings and curses. In Leviticus 26, and it says, if you obey all my commandments. And the reason he was telling them that remember these things, write them on your doorpost before your eyes, discuss them with your children, so that they would obey all of his commandments. And it's not that he's, it says, if you obey my commandments, I will give you rain. It's the blessings.
Right.
Every blessing that this nation has had is because we were originally a Christian nation.
Yeah, we came to this country, and I know the very first colony, and I talked about this today, Jamestown, was actually a business venture. The Virginia Trading Company back in London, made this because they saw an opportunity to make a profit.
See, I never knew that.
Okay.
Until you taught that today.
And they sent just men and boys. Okay, there was no women, and it was a business. And what I find, and by the way, folks, we're doing this because of Thanksgiving, and I printed out for our church on cardstock and made it nice so it could actually be framed if they want, and put it on your Thanksgiving table. Talk to your children about it. Talk to your grandchildren about it. And in that was the Mayflower Compact. And by the way, that wasn't the first agreement that they had made with Europe when they were wanting to go to Virginia. They had a place that they had already picked out, and so there was this charter that they had agreement for the governing body, because they needed each other, and they needed to have that pact, if you will. Yeah. Okay, and that's what the Mayflower compact was all about. It was a pact for their own well-being, um, and they rewrote that. Now, what is important for us to know is that in our history books that our children read. When I grew up, I remember learning about Pocahontas, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment. The difference between Jamestown and Plymouth, okay, and Cape Cod, there in Massachusetts. One was a godly endeavor, the other was a financial endeavor. And I'm going to talk about the difference in the Indians. See, Pocahontas was actually in the Virginia endeavor. She comes about in what happens, but in this, and I have it. You guys got it for your Thanksgiving tables. I hope you'll use it. Because it's conversation starters. But in school today, when I was learning, about the Pilgrims, they talked about Pocahontas. They talked about the Pilgrims. They talked about, religious, for religious persecution. I learned that. They don't teach that now. In fact, some of the books, and I'll just read out of the Mayflower Compact. They read like this: having undertaken for the honor of our king and country. They leave out a whole portion. Okay, it's left out. So the students that hear this, just it's not that they change anything; they just leave portions out,
right?
Conveniently, because it sends a whole different kind of message. And what you're talking about is God wants us to remember. It's important for us to remember, and I think it's important for us to remind our nation to be, as I put it today, light and darkness, to a dark, and share, because there's so many people like the freedom from religion, and I put theirs, and it is believe me, it's a religious, spiritual battle, warfare going on, and they have challenged us, but here's actually what it says in the Mayflower Compact. The school books have it, a lot of the school texts have it this way: having undertaken for the honor of our king and country a voyage to plant the first colony in the northern part of Virginia. It actually reads, having undertaken for the glory of God and the advancement of the Christian faith. Okay?
They left that out.
And honor of our king and country, a voyage to plant the first colony in the northern parts of Virginia. And they leave that out in today's school textbooks. Because we have to remove God, and we have to remove, it's a war tactic, okay? And it is in politics, and it is in just a whole lot of things. But as we are looking at Thanksgiving, we need to remind our families and our friends that as we give thanks, we have a lot to give thanks for. And I'm hearing so much today that, that religion has nothing to do with our country and shouldn't. And people confuse, that there's, from our Constitution. Our Constitution basically ensures our right to practice our faith.
That's what it was written as.
Yeah,
and they reversed it
from the Pilgrims. Actually, they took that cue from the Pilgrims, and the Pilgrims left Europe because they were having such problems as they got the scriptures and read it for themselves. See, the printing press removed in the church. It removed, because at one point only the priest could do the reading, and so most common folks didn't read. Okay, so they were at the mercy of and the integrity of the priest, or those in the church, pastors and stuff in the church, to give them the truth. And they and Bibles were expensive. In fact, they chained them to the pulpits because they didn't want them stolen. Because to make a Bible in Europe, it was usually like a $500,000 endeavor. It wasn't cheap to get scriptures. When the printing press came in, it changed everything. And so the Pilgrims had a Geneva Bible, not the King James 1611 version. Although I'm told, when I was going through, it was so interesting, Terry, when I was going through Bradford's notes in his journal. I got most of the stuff today, today from his, clippings from his journals. Okay, and was able, you see that they left. Great Britain had made it illegal. It was a capital offense.
Kill you.
They killed you, put you on the racks. If you try to worship in any other way than within the Church of England. And England was back and forth. They were, from Henry, when he broke away from the Catholic Church, then I think Mary became the Queen of England, and then she went back to the Catholic, she was, and then I think Elizabeth came in and it turned back again. And then you get, after Elizabeth, you get King James, who comes in. He writes the King James version of the Bible, and that's interesting reading, even just this way they spell things. It's so different. But here is these separatists, and they have the Geneva Bible, okay, and they're reading it for themselves, and they're like, man, we need to chase after God. We need to be God chasers. And what happened, Terry? I'm re-preaching. I'm sorry, but they were there, and it's like, let's go to the new land. We can just start this stuff over, and it was to set up a land, and when they got there, they rewrote this Mayflower Compact as a revision, because they didn't get to Virginia where they wanted to be, and they couldn't get there. I mean, they just didn't have supplies to sail on down. It was just way too much. They knew they had to land, and so they landed there. They finally get to Plymouth Rock in December, and they started out in July. What it should have been a month wound up 66 days, and there they are. But I find it amazing when I look at the two ventures, because the first colony in America is actually, they're in Virginia, Jamestown, and Jamestown is a business venture. What is interesting, God's got his fingers all over this.
He didn't want them landing there.
No. And so when they get thrown off course, they're way up north, and they're scouring the coastline for a safe harbor and a place that looks, and you have to understand now, Jamestown has been about 13 years in the process. Jamestown's actually had collapsed at one point. In my studies, I didn't say this morning, but in my studies, they had packed up and they were on their way in two small ships that they had rebuilt out because they'd gone through a famine. It was known as the third famine. They'd gone through the famine. 500 people had died off to 60, and they crammed in these two.
In the
small
original
ships.
Jamestown, they
right,
were
right, and they
get out
wanted
of
to
there.
head back, and they wanted to head back to England. And the governor had come in. He was coming in on a ship. They met in the harbor of Jamestown, okay, and he forced them under duress. They made them turn around because he needed everybody there, and then got it restarted, because they had abandoned the fort and got restarted in Jamestown. But Jamestown, is going. They're starving. It's going through. The Indians there in Jamestown actually, they have the everything but Jamestown itself, because an Indian servant had warned them. But there were several outskirt kind of development, towns that were developing by that time, and all of them were killed. The Indians went in and massacred. What they were trying to do is eradicate the Europeans. They wanted them gone, and so they were. And Jamestown got warning, and so they got ready. I forget the names of the guys who did. And Pocahontas, by this time, had gone back to Europe. She was basically taken captive, and then because of a business venture, Terry, the Virginia Trading Company gave passage to, I think it was like 40 or 50 women, because it was all men there. They have no wives and no women to, and so they paid their fare, and anybody who married the women then had to make payment, for their fare coming over. And so the women kind of went over almost like indentured servants kind of thing. And so, all these men, there were more than 500 men there at one point, and all these men there. And so Pocahontas became the wife of one of the men there in Jamestown, and he had to go back to secure supplies, because that's what Jamestown was counting on. Supplies, food from the Indians, which went south for them, and supplies from England, the supply ships to resupply. And then they grew a third, and Jamestown went through a drought. You can tell I've been doing a lot of study. Jamestown went through a drought. But here's the deal, is after Pocahontas died, and she was instrumental in Jamestown, after she died, 3 years after, is when these when a grandson of Chief took over, he had no interest in keeping peace with the settlers there in Jamestown, and so he started massacring them. Okay, that's a business venture. Now here's what I'm driving at. Okay, when we get up north for the separatists, God's got his fingerprints all over this one. And what a difference between, and they were terrified of the Indians, okay, the Native Americans. But God's got his fingerprints all over this. And what a difference. Bradford was able to, with the help of Squanto, who spoke English, Bradford was actually able to go from all the surrounding tribes within a 40-mile area and make peace treaties.
Squanto did that for
He helped him do that. Yeah, he helped him do that. You know, and so, you know, here's a group who is going for religious purposes, actually for going for God. They had this passion, you know, to develop the kingdom and spread the faith. And so they were going for God, and so God's fingers, it wasn't without hardship. You know, half of them died.
Yeah.
You know, when I talked about a 100-foot ship and there's 102 of them on there, you know, and we look at our church and think, oh my goodness, you know, to do that for 66 days in adverse conditions and in the winter. And
that wasn't like a first-class cruise ship.
No, it wasn't a 5-star. No, no, it really.
Imagine that many people packed into.
No, and for whatever reason, I don't know why there's this push, you know, by the state, because we have to admit that the school system is the state. They're teaching our children.
Yep.
Okay, it is mandatory attendance. Okay, every kid's supposed to get an education, and if you don't go there, these days there is homeschool options. You know, I like my daughter homeschools, and she does state tests. You know, actually, my children are in, you know, 6th grade. When they're in 6th grade, they're testing out on college level stuff, so they get a way better education from the homeschooling. But she on purpose has them go through every Iowa test, and they test. They really help the school. They you know, keep the school scores way high, so the school's glad to have them. But she's done a great job as their teacher. One grandson is in high school, and he takes a little more classes that she doesn't want to teach. But you know, the state is interested in just helping remove, you know, the school systems is what I'm talking about. And God wants us, and I think God needs the church particularly. And that's why today I was so passionate about it, is because the church has by and large been silent. We don't make sure. We don't tell his story of what he was doing in this nation. Our independence, all of it has God's fingerprints all over it. And I just want to, Linda, let's throw that scripture up there. I'm not sure where we are on our time, but I shared this morning in Jeremiah 29:11. God says this to Israel, but I think it applies to America. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for well-being and not for calamity, in order to give you a future and a hope. I don't know what version I threw up there. It's probably the contemporary version. But God has plans for us. We're down to 5 minutes, and I'm just warming up. You know, but Thanksgiving, what a good time to bring into the church families, and that's a part of discipling. I mean, if we, the church, if we take the time to educate, because most of the kids coming up today they don't know. They don't know. No. That's why it's so, I think, in my opinion, I think that's why it's so easy to go and destroy these historical monuments. You know, it's the mindset of today, and we don't understand how blessed we have been. When Abraham Lincoln, and that gets all messed up these days. You know, the people, you know, that is government of the people, by the people, and for the people, and think that there should be no religious affiliations. That isn't what our country was set up at all. Just the opposite. And that's what the Pilgrims wanted. They didn't want a state religion, but they wanted the ability to be free to worship in the best, to chase after God in the best possible way that they could find. But they didn't expect there to be no prayer in school. In their schools, they didn't expect there to be no prayers at their Thanksgivings. They didn't think, National Day of Prayer. I shared with you the lawsuits over to President
Yep.
Bush and President Obama for having a National Day of Prayer. My
For
goodness.
allowing it.
Yeah. Rick, what is it? Rick Perry in
Rick Perry,
Texas.
the governor, U.S. governor
Yeah,
of Texas.
he called for prayer for his state. We need God's help. And when I look at Adams and his son, both of them, calling for prayer for the nation, over and over and over again as this nation gets started. George Washington, this this nation has been set up under God. Why we want to move away from that, I don't understand. But I know this, and you alluded to it in your readings from Leviticus, that it has to do with God's blessings
Yep.
and curses. I'd put up today on the screen, I know it was hard to see, but their homepage for the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and they had one of the banners that scrolled across there. I don't need God to be good. What a lie! We are naturally bad. Our bent is toward bad.
Well, it isn't only that. Salvation has nothing to do with being good.
I know. It's by grace.
Exactly. So, and then they're saying something about going to hell. There was some mention
Yeah,
about
I'm not afraid of going to hell, yeah.
I'm not afraid of going to hell, or you don't need to be afraid of going to hell. Wow.
Yeah, your picture here. And it's like, yeah. And they have 30,000 followers.
Like hell, if you go there, it's just like a little five minutes of discomfort or something. No.
No.
People need to think about eternity.
Yeah. Yes, Tommy, reading about the history of an American Revolution and God is a big part of the structure of this country. I'm told that I have, a minute? Do I have a minute left, Linda?
It's 1:27.
1:27. Let me do a closing. We're going to come back to this, Tommy. Good stuff. Good having you with us tonight, Tommy. Most of our people are cleaning up for supper. They're all out to supper. If you're looking for a church, I invite you to come and join us. It is a great place to go and worship the Lord together. We talk about stuff that's very relevant, and today I was preaching on Thanksgiving and the Pilgrims and their whole reason for coming. But we're located 410 28th Street. Our services is at 10:30, and if you're in the area, we'd love to have you. You'll find a welcoming church, a lovely group of people. These guys are wonderful. If you can't, we stream our services live at 10:30. Tommy, I don't know what time you ought to throw that up there, but Tommy, they stream their services too. There's lots of churches out there, but we do stream our services at 10:30 every Sunday, and would love to have you join us. We have a lot of people get on. Glad that you joined us tonight. I want you to know that God has blessed this nation. And God's had his fingerprints on the development of this nation. And while man's plan was to start a business venture, God had another plan way up north and sent some pilgrims to start a work of God in this newfound land called America. I hope that you trust God, and this Thanksgiving you have a blessed Thanksgiving. Good night. My goodness, bro, we were just warming up.
It absolutely blows my mind.